The unexpected arrival. The bridge of the UES Titan hummed with anticipation as Captain Marcus Chen reviewed the final system checks. His reflection in the darkened viewport showed a man in his mid-40s, gray streaking through his black hair, eyes sharp with focus. Today marked humanity's greatest achievement. The Titan would become the first human vessel to break the light barrier and venture beyond the solar system. The warship stretched 4 kilometers from bow to stern, a monument to human engineering and determination. Every plate of reinforced titanium armor, every power conduit, every weapon system represented decades of research and the combined effort of every nation on Earth. Marcus had served in various naval forces for 23 years, but nothing compared to the responsibility he felt now. Around him, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. His second-in-command, Commander Sarah Okonkwo, monitored the navigation systems with unwavering concentration. Her fingers moved across holographic displays, triple-checking calculations that had already been verified 100 times. Lieutenant James Rodriguez sat at tactical, his youthful face betraying excitement despite his attempts at professional composure. Dr. Yuki Tanaka occupied the science station, her analytical mind already racing ahead to what they might discover. Deep in the engineering section, Chief Engineer Robert McAllister supervised the quantum drive reactor. The Scottish engineer had invested 5 years of his life into this propulsion system. Every circuit bore his personal inspection. Every safety protocol reflected his paranoid attention to detail. His voice came through the intercom with gruff confidence, reporting all systems nominal. Marcus took a deep breath and gave the order that would change human history. The quantum drive engaged, folding space around the massive vessel. The crew experienced a sensation unlike anything they had trained for, as if reality itself bent and twisted. Color shifted through impossible spectrums. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Then everything snapped back to normal. They had done it. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel. The celebration lasted exactly 5 seconds before alarms began screaming throughout the ship. Sarah's face drained of color as she frantically checked her instruments. They were not orbiting Mars where the jump was calculated to end. The star patterns were completely wrong. Gravitational readings showed massive artificial structures nearby. Everything was wrong. The main view screen activated, showing a sight that froze every person on the bridge. Thousands of structures orbited a blue-green planet that was definitely not in their solar system. Enormous stations hung in space, connected by streams of traffic that suggested a civilization far more advanced than humanity had ever imagined. Ships of designs that defied human engineering principles moved between stations in organized patterns. Energy signatures pulsed from technology that should not exist. Dr. Tanaka gasped, her scientific mind struggling to process the impossible data. Rodriguez's excitement transformed into shock. Sarah immediately began calculating escape vectors, but Marcus simply stared at the screen, understanding the profound implications of what he was seeing. Humanity was not alone. They had never been alone, and they had just appeared without warning in someone else's territory. On the primary orbital station above the planet called Unity Prime, emergency sirens shattered the usual calm. Defense coordinators rushed to their positions as sensors detected an impossible event. A massive vessel had materialized in their space without any warning signals, without following entry protocols, without transmitting identification codes. The readings coming from this unknown ship defied all established understanding of spacecraft design. High Commander Thresh was a Valorian, a species resembling Earth's great cats but standing upright with sophisticated hands and powerful builds. His golden fur bristled as he read the tactical analysis. The unknown vessel's power output exceeded anything in the assembly database by factors that suggested sensor malfunction. Its armor thickness was absurd by galactic standards. The weapon placements covering its hull indicated destructive potential that violated every principle of civilized warfare. This was either a catastrophic equipment failure or a threat unlike anything the Galactic Assembly had encountered in its 8,000 years of existence. In the Assembly Council chambers, Councillor Venn received the emergency report with disbelief. The elderly Seraphim's crystalline body shifted through colors that indicated deep concern. The Galactic Assembly represented 412 species across 16,000 star systems. They had encountered countless civilizations over the millennia, integrating most peacefully into their federation. But nothing like this had ever simply appeared at the heart of assembly space. Scholar Nexus, a being of pure consciousness residing in a containment field, found the readings fascinating rather than frightening. This vessel represented a completely different approach to space travel and warfare. While assembly species focused on elegance and integration of organic and synthetic systems, this ship seemed built on pure mechanical power and redundancy. Nexus immediately requested detailed scans despite the crisis protocols. Driven by insatiable curiosity about this new paradigm, Ambassador Lyra Quinn received the emergency assignment with equal parts terror and exhilaration. The young Avix diplomat had dreamed of handling a first-contact situation since entering the diplomatic corps. Her species resembled Earth's birds with iridescent feathers that changed color based on emotion. But the circumstances were far from the peaceful scenario she had imagined. An unknown warship hovering over the Assembly's capital world was not how these meetings were supposed to happen. Still, this was her opportunity to prove herself to the Assembly hierarchy. Her feathers flickered with nervous energy as she prepared to make contact with the unknown species. Aboard the Titan, Marcus made his decision quickly. Sarah wanted to engage the quantum drive immediately and jump away, but the system needed hours to recharge after such a long voyage. Rodriguez suggested powering up weapons to show strength, but that would certainly be interpreted as hostile. Dr. Tanaka recommended attempting communication, and Marcus agreed completely. They needed to signal peaceful intentions while surrounded by forces of unknown capability and unknown intent. Marcus ordered all weapon systems to remain powered down. The Titan's reactor stayed active but purely for defensive shields and life support. He recorded a message explaining their situation as clearly as possible. They were explorers from Earth, a planet in a distant system. A navigation error during their test flight had brought them here by accident. They meant absolutely no harm, and requested assistance in establishing proper communication protocols. Dr. Tanaka worked frantically to decode the incoming alien transmissions. The aliens were definitely trying to communicate, but their languages bore no relation to anything human. Fortunately, the mathematical patterns embedded in their transmissions gave her something to work with. Within 90 minutes, she had established basic translation protocols using mathematics as a universal language. The alien messages became clear. They wanted to talk. They were curious. But they were also absolutely terrified. Ambassador Lyra's first communication with the humans was brief and formal. She requested that the unknown vessel power down its primary reactor as a gesture of peaceful intent. The response shocked everyone monitoring the transmission. Engineer McAllister explained in his thick accent that the Titan's reactor could not be shut down quickly. The process would take at least 4 weeks, and forcing an emergency shutdown risked catastrophic failure that could destroy half the orbital structures nearby. This revelation sent fresh waves of panic through assembly forces. A reactor that massive, that could not be easily disabled, meant power generation beyond anything they understood. High Commander Thresh ordered his fleet to maintain defensive positions, but avoid any action that could be perceived as aggressive. This situation could spiral into war with a single misunderstanding. Over the next 12 hours, both sides learned about each other through careful exchange of information. The humans discovered they had stumbled into territory belonging to the Galactic Assembly, a vast federation spanning a significant portion of the galaxy. The Assembly learned that Earth was an isolated world that had only just achieved faster than light capability on this very voyage. Both sides realized they were dealing with something completely unexpected. Dr. Tanaka studied everything the Assembly shared about their technology and culture. She explained to Marcus that Assembly species focused on very different priorities than humans. They valued efficiency and harmony, working to enhance their natural abilities through elegant technology. The idea of building one massive warship instead of a fleet of smaller, specialized vessels was completely foreign to their philosophy. Meanwhile, Scholar Nexus analyzed every scan of the Titan and reached a disturbing conclusion. The ship's armor could withstand sustained bombardment from dozens of Assembly capital ships. Its engines generated thrust equivalent to 200 Assembly vessels, and the weapons, based on their energy signatures and design principles, suggested destructive potential that challenged established theories of warfare. Nexus shared these findings with High Commander Thresh, who received them with warrior's pragmatism. If these readings were accurate, traditional assembly military doctrine had just become obsolete. Rodriguez suggested to Marcus that they should demonstrate the Titan's capabilities to establish credibility and deter any thoughts of aggression. Sarah argued against revealing their full strength, preferring to keep potential advantages hidden. Marcus decided to wait and observe. They were uninvited guests in assembly space. Better to build trust slowly than risk catastrophic misunderstanding through displays of force. The situation remained tense but stable for 3 days. Both sides continued careful diplomatic exchanges. Cultural information was shared. Ambassador Lyra began to understand human concepts of defense and deterrence. Marcus started to grasp assembly principles of cooperative civilization. Then something went terribly wrong. A mid-level officer in the assembly defense fleet, terrified by the massive human warship and frustrated by what he perceived as weakness in command's cautious response, made an unauthorized decision. He launched a probe toward the Titan, equipped with advanced scanning equipment but also carrying a small explosive charge. His intention was to test the ship's defenses without causing real damage, forcing command to take stronger action. The Titan's automated point defense systems detected the probe instantly. Sophisticated targeting computers identified it as a potential threat based on the explosive signature. Rodriguez barely had time to register the alert before automated systems engaged. A brief pulse from a close-range defense laser vaporized the probe completely. The entire engagement lasted less than 3 seconds. The crew barely noticed it happen. For assembly forces watching, those 3 seconds changed everything. They had seen their probe, moving at high velocity with active countermeasures and stealth coding, destroyed so casually that the human crew did not even react. If this was how the Titan handled minor threats automatically, what could it do when the crew actually intended to fight? The implications were clear and absolutely terrifying. Demonstration of Power High Commander Thresh sat in absolute silence as his officers reported the probe's destruction. Around him, the command center buzzed with anxious conversations that he made no effort to quiet. The tactical display showed the replay again and again. 3 seconds, 1 probe. Complete annihilation. The human crew had not even acknowledged the engagement. Counselor Ven's holographic image materialized on the communication screen, crystalline body shifting through colors that indicated extreme distress. The Seraphim Elder's voice carried centuries of diplomatic experience, but now it trembled with uncertainty. Behind Ven, other council members argued in heated tones, their voices overlapping in multiple languages that the translation matrix struggled to process. Scholar Nexus simply observed, consciousness pulsing with fascination at the technological gap being revealed. Ambassador Lyra's feathers had gone completely dark, a sign of profound fear in the Avic species. She had been building rapport with the humans over 3 days, believing she understood them. Now she realized how little any of them truly comprehended about these newcomers. Marcus received the frantic communication from Lyra explaining what had happened. He immediately understood the problem. What seemed like a minor automated response to his crew looked like an overwhelming demonstration of superiority to the assembly. He needed to calm the situation before fear drove someone to make an even worse decision. But part of him recognized that the situation had fundamentally changed. The assembly now knew what his ship could do, at least a fraction of it. The balance of power had shifted and there was no going back to ignorance. Marcus called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. Sarah pulled up tactical displays showing assembly fleet positions. Ships were repositioning, forming defensive patterns around critical infrastructure. Rodriguez monitored communication channels, reporting increased military chatter and rising panic in their transmissions. Dr. Tanaka looked worried, understanding that fear could be more dangerous than hostility. Chief Engineer McAllister joined via video link from engineering, his weathered face serious. He had been running diagnostics on the point defense system that had fired. Everything had functioned exactly as designed. The Titan had responded to a potential threat with appropriate force. But appropriate by human military standards clearly exceeded assembly expectations by a terrifying margin. The destruction of the probe created a crisis that threatened to shatter the fragile peace. The junior officer who launched the unauthorized attack was immediately removed from duty and placed under arrest, but the damage was done. The Assembly Military Command had witnessed something that fundamentally challenged their understanding of warfare. An emergency full council session convened within hours. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered virtually, their images filling the grand chamber on Unity Prime. Councillor Venn stood before them and argued passionately for continued diplomatic efforts. The Seraphim reminded everyone that the humans had shown restraint from the beginning. They had powered down weapons when they arrived. They had explained their presence honestly. They had not retaliated when fired upon, even accidentally. These were not the actions of an aggressive species seeking conflict, but other voices demanded harsher measures. Some councillors wanted the human ship quarantined in uninhabited space, far from any assembly worlds. Others suggested pooling military resources from multiple species to force the humans to leave assembly territory entirely. A few extremists even whispered about preemptive strikes, though none dared voice such thoughts openly in formal session. The debate grew heated as fear overrode millennia of diplomatic tradition. Species that had cooperated peacefully for generations now argued with rising hostility, each seeing the human presence through the lens of their own survival instincts. Scholar Nexus presented a different perspective that cut through the emotional chaos. The consciousness being had analyzed every interaction with the humans and noticed something crucial that others had missed. The humans did not seem to fully understand how advanced their technology appeared to assembly species. Their casual comments about power output, armor specifications, and weapon capabilities suggested they considered their ship normal, perhaps even modest by their own standards. This observation troubled everyone who heard it. If the Titan represented normal human engineering, what would their actual military forces look like? What would happen when Earth built more of these vessels? The Assembly might be witnessing the arrival of a species that could dominate the entire galaxy simply through their approach to technology. Nexus recommended learning more through cooperation rather than confrontation. The scholar suggested requesting a formal demonstration of the ship's capabilities in a controlled environment. Knowledge would reduce fear more effectively than ignorance. Understanding would build trust better than speculation. High Commander Thresh agreed with this approach immediately. As a career warrior, he understood that unknown capabilities bred paranoia, and paranoia led to mistakes. Better to know exactly what they faced, even if the truth proved frightening. He transmitted a formal request through Ambassador Lyra. Would the humans be willing to demonstrate their vessel's capabilities in a controlled environment away from inhabited space? On the Titan, Marcus received the request and immediately contacted Earth Command through the quantum communicator. The device allowed near instantaneous communication across vast distances, though the energy requirements meant it could only be used sparingly. He explained the situation in detail and requested guidance from home. Earth's response came after 6 hours of deliberation. The message was surprisingly direct. Cooperate within reasonable limits, build trust through transparency, show them what the ship could do, but maintain operational security regarding truly sensitive systems. Establish humanity as a partner, not a threat. Marcus gathered his senior staff to discuss implementation. Sarah remained suspicious of the timing. Why request a demonstration immediately after accidentally testing their defenses? It felt like gathering intelligence for a potential attack. Rodriguez was enthusiastic about showing what the Titan could do. Eager to establish credibility, Dr. Tanaka worried they would reveal too much and make the assembly more frightened rather than less. McAllister just wanted to ensure his ship performed properly, if they were going to put on a show. He had pride in his engineering, and this would be the first real test of integrated systems under operational conditions. After lengthy debate, Marcus decided to accept the Assembly's request. They would travel to a designated testing area at the edge of assembly space and conduct limited weapons demonstrations, limited being the critical word. They would show enough to establish credibility and deter aggression without revealing the Titan's full capabilities. It was a careful balance between transparency and security, between building trust and maintaining advantage. The Titan traveled to the designated test site accompanied by an assembly observation fleet. Dozens of ships from multiple species followed at respectful distance, their sensors focused entirely on the massive human warship. Every species had representatives present, all eager to gather data about this technological anomaly that had appeared in their space. Rodriguez coordinated with McAllister on which systems to activate for the demonstration. They agreed to show point defense capabilities, medium-range railguns, and possibly one shot from the primary spinal weapon. Nothing more unless circumstances absolutely demanded it. They would keep the advanced missile systems, electronic warfare capabilities, and experimental energy weapons completely hidden. During the 3-day journey to the test site, Dr. Tanaka spent considerable time with Ambassador Lyra, both learning more about each other's cultures. The AVIX diplomat explained that most assembly warfare involved precision strikes and electronic disruption. The goal was always to disable enemy capability with minimal destruction. The idea of building weapons designed to completely obliterate targets seemed wasteful and barbaric to assembly philosophy. Tanaka tried to explain human military thinking. Overwhelming force served as deterrent. If potential enemies knew they could not win, they would not attack in the first place. Building powerful weapons prevented wars rather than starting them. Peace through strength had been humanity's doctrine for centuries. Lyra listened carefully, her feathers flickering with colors indicating confusion mixed with genuine fascination. The concept was not entirely foreign, but the scale was unprecedented. Humans had taken the deterrence principle to extremes the assembly had never imagined necessary or even possible. Scholar Nexus made an unusual request. The consciousness being wanted to observe the demonstration from aboard the Titan itself, to witness human systems and procedures firsthand. Marcus was reluctant initially, concerned about revealing too much internal capability, but Sarah convinced him it would build significant goodwill and demonstrate confidence in their peaceful intentions. They allowed a small delegation aboard, including Nexus Lyra and a Valorian military observer named Commander Crix. The aliens' reactions to the Titan's interior proved revealing. The corridors were narrow and cramped by assembly standards, optimized for human proportions rather than the diverse body types of galactic species. Redundant systems appeared everywhere, with backup power conduits and emergency equipment lining every passage. The design philosophy became immediately apparent. Every system had a backup. Every backup had another backup. The ship was built to continue fighting regardless of damage sustained. Assembly ships were elegant and efficient, designed to avoid damage through speed and precision. The Titan was brutal and unstoppable, designed to absorb damage and keep functioning. McAllister gave the alien visitors a tour of one reactor chamber, carefully avoiding the more sensitive areas. Nexus's consciousness pulsed with amazement at the sheer scale of the power generation systems. The reactor produced more energy than some assembly space stations. And this powered only propulsion and primary weapons. Life support and defensive systems ran off completely separate power sources. The redundancy seemed excessive, almost paranoid, but clearly intentional. Humans had designed this ship to survive anything. In the observation fleet, High Commander Thresh briefed his commanders on what to watch for during the demonstration. He wanted detailed analysis of power consumption patterns, targeting accuracy, reload times, and heat dissipation. Somewhere in this test there had to be weaknesses they could identify. No ship was perfect. Even this monster had to have vulnerabilities they could exploit if circumstances ever required it. The Titan reached the designated asteroid field and took position. The test area had been carefully selected, far from any inhabited systems or important resources. Massive asteroids of various sizes floated in chaotic patterns, providing perfect targets for weapons testing. Marcus gave the order to begin. The first phase tested point defense systems. Rodriguez activated the automated turrets and launched simulated missile threats using small drones. The close-in weapons engaged instantly, tracking and eliminating targets with mechanical precision. Laser pulses and kinetic rounds intercepted every drone without missing a single target. Assembly observers noted the speed and accuracy carefully. It was impressive, comparable to their own best systems. Perhaps the humans were not so impossibly far ahead after all. Relief began spreading through the observation fleet. Maybe they could compete with this technology given time. Phase 2 shattered that premature optimism completely. Rodriguez targeted larger asteroids with the ship's railgun batteries. Magnetic accelerators launched tungsten projectiles at velocities approaching 5% of light speed. The kinetic impactors hit with devastating force, pulverizing rocks the size of buildings into expanding clouds of dust and debris. The railguns fired in rapid sequence, demonstrating both pinpoint accuracy and impressive rate of fire. Assembly officers watching began to look genuinely concerned. This level of kinetic weaponry exceeded anything in their combined arsenal. Ships hit by those projectiles would not be disabled. They would simply cease to exist. On the Titan's bridge, Nexus observed McAllister monitoring the power systems with casual efficiency. The engineer made minor adjustments to optimize performance, but he worked with relaxed confidence rather than stress. Curious, Nexus asked what percentage of the ship's total power they were currently using for these demonstrations. McAllister glanced at his displays and answered without particular emphasis. Less than 8%. Nexus's consciousness flickered with shock. 8%. They were demonstrating weapons that outclassed assembly technology, while barely tapping the ship's capabilities. The scholar looked through reinforced windows at the massive reactor chamber, its core glowing with barely contained power. If this was 8%, what would full power look like? The question was both fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Marcus authorized the final phase. One shot from the main weapon. Rodriguez confirmed the target. A massive asteroid nearly 2 kilometers across, roughly spherical in shape. The perfect target to demonstrate the primary weapon's true potential. The spinal mass driver began its charging sequence. Energy flowed through magnetic coils that ran nearly the entire length of the ship. A tungsten projectile the size of a truck loaded into the firing chamber. Additional capacitors fed power into the system. The weapon reached full charge and Rodriguez fired. The projectile accelerated down the length of the Titan at 98% of light speed. It crossed the distance to the target asteroid in a fraction of a second. The impact released energy equivalent to a large nuclear weapon. The asteroid did not shatter or break apart. It simply ceased to exist, vaporized into an expanding cloud of superheated plasma that glowed like a newborn star. The explosion was visible from the observation fleet despite the enormous distance. For several long seconds, a miniature sun blazed in the asteroid field, slowly fading as the plasma dispersed. Aboard the observation ships, complete silence fell. Lyra's feathers went utterly dark. Thresh stared at his screen's reptilian face frozen. Ven, watching from Unity Prime, felt their crystalline body cycle through every color, indicating extreme distress. The raw, destructive power they had just witnessed exceeded anything in 8 millennia of assembly military history. A single shot had eliminated a target that would have required sustained bombardment from multiple capital ships. One trigger pull, one asteroid gone. Nexus asked the question that everyone was thinking but afraid to voice. How much power did that shot require? McAllister checked his engineering readouts and answered matter-of-factly. About 22% of maximum reactor output. The implications hit like a physical blow. The humans had just demonstrated a weapon that could destroy capital ships with single shots, and they had used barely a fifth of their available power. At maximum output, the Titan could engage entire battle fleets. In the observation fleet, tactical computers calculated scenarios frantically. Assembly doctrine relied on distributed warfare, spreading forces to present multiple targets and overwhelming enemies through coordinated strikes. That entire strategy became useless against a single weapons platform. This powerful, concentrated firepower trumped distributed tactics completely. Every assumption about space combat had just been proven wrong. Scholar Nexus spoke, quietly with Dr. Tanaka and Engineer McAllister, conducting an impromptu interview about human engineering philosophy. They explained concepts that seemed obvious to them, but revolutionary to assembly thinking. Build something so powerful that enemies surrender rather than fight. Make the cost of aggression so high that peace becomes the only rational choice. Weaponize deterrence itself. Nexus realized humans had not just built a powerful ship. They had created an entirely new paradigm for warfare, based on concentrated, overwhelming force rather than elegant, distributed efficiency. High Commander, Thresh requested private communication with Captain Marcus. The two military leaders spoke with mutual respect, warrior to warrior. Thresh admitted directly that the Assembly could not match the Titan in direct combat. Their fleet tactics assumed opponents with similar capabilities. Against this level of concentrated power, traditional Assembly warfare became impossible. Marcus appreciated the commander's honesty and decided to reciprocate with his own revelation. The Titan was humanity's first Colossus-class vessel, but not the only one. Earth had 6 more identical warships under construction. 3 were nearly complete. Within 18 months, humanity would have 7 of these vessels operational. The communication ended with Thresh sitting in stunned silence. 7 of these ships, 7 weapons platforms that could each challenge entire fleets. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted so dramatically that old assumptions about military strength no longer applied. Humans had changed everything, and they had done it accidentally while testing their first faster-than-light vessel. As the Titan prepared to return to Unity Prime for continued diplomatic talks, Ambassador Lyra filed her complete report. Commander Sarah still worried they had revealed too much about their capabilities. Marcus disagreed. Transparency was necessary to build trust and prevent conflict born from fear of the unknown. The demonstration had served its purpose. Now both sides understood what they were dealing with. Humanity was not a threat-seeking conquest, but they were also not a species that could be threatened or coerced. What none of them knew was that the demonstration had been observed by more than just assembly forces. Deep in uncharted space, another power had been watching assembly territory for signs of weakness or opportunity, and they had just seen something very interesting indeed.